Dr. Ron Paul, thank you so much for joining the show today. Really appreciate seeing you and chatting with you.
Kim, it's nice to be with you.
We are both going to be at the Rage Against the War Machine rally this Sunday in Washington, D.C. We're going to both be speaking alongside many others. We are I feel like really tense times. We're on the brink of what feels like World War III. Is this the most intense time period in your lifetime? Right at the, is this what it feels like going right into a big war? Or do you think we could back this down?
Well, I think we can, and we should, because it wouldn't be difficult if we had the right people doing the right decision. But right now, we don't have that available to us. No, I have to admit, I had another experience way back in 1962. I was a medical resident at Henry Ford Hospital, and there was a bit of a crisis in Cuba, and they had the Russians, the Soviets had missiles down there. And within a week, I had a draft notice, draft me out of my residency. So for a few weeks there, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of pins and needles going around. So there was a tense moment. I think I'd have to say at that time that was greater than what we're experiencing now. But I get upset with the whole system continuously because I see things happening in the United States. We're worrying about a war over there. I am worried about the war against the American people by our own government. So I stay annoyed constantly, and this is just another episode. And I'm convinced that if you could wave a wand and get rid of the people who like war and part of the military-industrial complex, and get rid of that element, we could get through this easily. But it would mean this is the most immediate thing we do, during the campaign before the presidential campaign, and we were in the Middle East war. And I said, just bring the troops home. We just marched in, just march out. And I think that's it. But I'd like to add now, just don't march in, then we wouldn't have these kind of problems.
Yeah, where do you think all of this stems from? I mean, we just seem to have this growing military industrial complex. The budget never ceases to increase. It does feel like people, we elect people that go off to Washington who say they want to end these wars, or they want to refunnel the money towards other programs, or eliminate this sort of funding in general because the budget is too bloated. But then when they get there, they just seem to fall in line. Is it groupthink that is causing this? Are there outside forces that are pressuring them? I mean, where is this? Why can we we just never seem to be able to end this?
Well, I think there are outside forces which stir up the fear and the desire to, do something about it. But I think ultimately, though, governments reflect what the people are thinking. The people were complacent and went along and didn't complain and listened to the fearmongers, and they went along with COVID. Even the doctors did. It was atrocious. And but when the people woke up, which happened to a large degree, and said, enough is enough, let's not do this. That was what we witnessed in the 60s. The war, there was a lingering, and 60,000 Americans get killed. And finally, the streets woke up here. And I think one of the things we're trying to do this Sunday is wake up people before we get to that point, because I think instincts are good. I think there's some hints right now that the people are shifting in our direction. And I think that is good. But the people have to wake up. And, when it comes to spending, the people want the spending. How many people work in the military industrial complex? How many people get checks from the government? It goes on and on. So people might say, yeah, Ron, I think you're right. But for right now, we have to do this, and we have to clean up this mess, which means we have to suffer through deficit. We have a virus to destroy. So therefore, we need $2 trillion more here in the next year. So they always have to build up the fear. And then the people respond by saying, well, if you need the money, we just have to do it. But right now, I think we're starting to witness that the people are catching on a little sooner this time. That's why I'm keeping my fingers crossed to be hopeful that we might be able to stir up more support come this Sunday.
I mean, I'm hopeful as well, but then at the same time, I feel like a lot of the voices that have been against funding for Ukraine, all this endless funding, the minute you bring up China, it just seems like suddenly they're like, oh, but China. And that does seem to be the mentality. Like you brought up the virus. It was like, oh, but the virus. And now it's, oh, but Russia. And then soon it's going to be, oh, but China. So it does seem
Oh,
like
yeah.
they're able to figure out the button to push, right, to get people to go along with it. It's never ending.
That's right. But I can go one step further. Even if you recognize that and try to modify all the false propaganda noise about China, that when things are going on in the world constantly, and when you think about the deep state and the invisible governments, I don't think we shouldn't think that we're dealing with a government that's going to be responsive in many ways, because when push comes to shove, whether it's the CIA that is not monitored or whether it's the Federal Reserve, you could fund anything and it's all in secret. You can bail out governments and all kinds of warring factions around the world. So the problem is very, very big. On the short run, is about all we can do is argue the case. Enough is enough. Shift your gears. Let's go in a different direction. And right now, I think you're absolutely right. People are careless. They say, oh, yeah, I think we're against what we're doing in Ukraine, but we have to concentrate on China. Well, I think that is a lot of noise, but it's still a reflection of an attitude that's been perpetuated in mainstream media, our universities, our government, and it's been around for a long time. So ultimately, what changed what we were living with before our revolution was, there was a tyranny controlling us. But finally, the Jeffersonians came along and said, there's a better way. And things changed. So I think right now we're at a stage where we definitely need a change in direction. But the most we can do on the immediate in immediate point is just shift gears in the reverse and get rid of this. And that's why I think that this wake up with the COVID is very beneficial to show that people can wake up. They woke up over Vietnam way too late. And even though we don't have the solution just by snapping our finger, I think we just have to put the message out there, because I do believe the majority of the people are with us.
Yeah, one of the tough things that's going on around the rally this Sunday is that there's just a lot of people who are unwilling to coalesce with certain other people. We're seeing this drama sort of play out with this rally, where you've got even Medea Benjamin, who's one of the most anti-war activists out there with Code Pink. She's been told by Code Pink, asked, don't speak because we don't want you on the same stage as so-and-so. Or people are boycotting or essentially saying, I just cannot, I cannot agree with this person on certain things. And so therefore, this whole thing is just a sham. And that seems to be the big demise. If American people can't put their differences aside to coalesce for one thing, how can we possibly make change? War, especially when it comes to war, I mean, this is killing people. Literally, people are dying. And there are people that are essentially saying, yeah, but my hatred for this particular speaker is greater than my hatred for a mother having to hold her dead child in their arms. That doesn't make any sense. Yet that is what we're sort of up against when it comes to trying to coalesce. So I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I do agree with you. I think people are changing their minds and they're starting to say, hey, we're spending endless money. But then at the same time, they just get blinded by certain emotions, hatred for certain people or groups, or their rabid war hawkishness against China. It just seems like the only way that we're really going to ever affect actual change and stop being a warmongering country is unfortunately the same way that many other empires that were similar, the way that they ended it. which was either they went completely bankrupt and their societies crumbled, or they were defeated by another military. I mean, which one do you think is more likely?
Well, I think we have to realize and be realistic to know that waving a wand is not going to happen. And so I think it's an attitude. I spend as much time over outside of medicine trying to change the educational system than I do it just in pure politics. But when I was in Washington, I still believed in what we're trying to do this weekend. And for instance, Dennis Kucinich is a very good friend, and I think he's going to be there Sunday. So, yeah, you say, well, Dennis, that doesn't mean the majority of the Democrats come over. But we did, have some inroads and talk to people. But somebody said, how did you put up with it? You're not getting results, and you got to move faster. And I said, well, it never bothered me too much. I just didn't have a high expectation. But if I got one little thing, people would come, and I think there has been a shift. It's never fast enough. I think on the issue of war, it's been matter of fact, more difficult than calling attention to the insanities of the Federal Reserve System. People talk about it now and know about it, and it's self-destructing right now. Our foreign policy will. So you indicate that, yes, how will it end? Like all empires end the same way. They finally collapse because there's too much attention in foreign affairs. And that may be the way it ends. Well, why are you wasting your time if it's going to end like that? So that we can help to rebuild it. Because that's the big issue now, because I don't believe we're going to have an election where we're going to have the majority in the Congress of libertarians and constitutionalists. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't find one person here and one person there and work on your kids and your educational system. I have a homeschooling program, and that's the way the world works. And we have seen positive things happen, eventually that can happen. I do know one thing: if we do zero and try to hide in a corner, they have too many guns and too many CIA agents and too much surveillance that they know everything that we do. So I think the best thing is you get up front and don't have high expectations. I've always been pleased that it seems like I got more attention than I ever dreamed of, because I never expected to be elected to Congress. That was one thing. And people do pay attention. And even now, I think of the people that I meet along the way, and they're excited about what's happening. Well, I started this group and this group just in the last 20 years. That the things that's happened that I barely knew about, but had a little bit to do with it. So I think it's there. But why do you do it? Because that's the only thing I know that could do it in a peaceful manner.
Yeah, I mean, we have to speak up. I mean, we have to do something about it. We have to at least try. I mean, even if the machine is much greater than our might, we have to at least try to stop it and warn and say, listen, this is where we're headed. We're headed for doom. I mean, all of these people, I find it so ironic that so many people in Washington who are, China, 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 they're coming after us. And they don't realize that by them constantly going after China, blowing up balloons in the sky, just doing crazy stuff, that is actually speeding up the demise of our own nation, that is how we end up collapsing as an empire, is by wasting all of this money, putting all our resources towards this, where I don't think I don't think they're the military threat. Economically, I think that's what we should be paying attention to, is how do we compete in the global world economically? How do we produce? How do we have exports? How do we compete in that way? And yet instead, we're just trying to go around and flex muscles and say, don't you dare try to surpass us. We're the biggest country. Don't you dare. Well, in today's economic climate of inflation and general instability, many people are rethinking their investment strategies. Recent stock market turbulence and global issues have caused a decrease in retirement accounts, as well as decreased disposable income. However, the price of gold rose 14% from November of 2022 to February of 2023. So now would probably be a good time to invest in gold through Birch Gold rather than going along with whatever the government has planned for us. So you can take your future into your own hands by investing in something stable in these unstable times. The process of converting a traditional IRA or 401k into a precious metals IRA has been made simple by Birch Gold. To get started, simply visit birchgold.com/Kim and request a free info kit on gold, followed by a consultation with a precious metals specialist. Don't wait to find out what's going to happen with inflation or the value of the dollar, because who knows? Birch Gold has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and positive feedback from thousands of satisfied customers. They can be trusted to safeguard your future. So visit birchgold.com/Kim to take this first step in protecting your assets with gold.